Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar this evening. My name is Justin Harrison and it's a pleasure to spend a few moments with you. The topic tonight, as you're all aware, you can see on your screen, is frankincense, the king of essential oils. And I'm super excited about this because it is my very favorite essential oil, and many of you have challenged me over the years by asking if I have it on my person, and I generally do at all times because it is that amazing of an essential oil for me and my family. Tonight, we have one of our company owners with us and our chief medical officer, and also the author of a book on this very essential oil, Dr. David Hill. And for those of you that haven't heard Dr. Hill speak or present before, let me just share with you briefly. He has a gift to be able to present and explain essential oils in such a way that we can all comprehend, I guess is the best way to explain it, even at my level, to be able to understand what the essential oils are, why they work, and how to use them. And his knowledge is vast. He's one of the foremost authorities on essential oils in existence on the planet Earth today. And we're just so grateful. He's very, very busy. In fact, this webinar was intended to be live. His schedule precluded him being with us live tonight, so this was recorded a few hours earlier. Many of you have texted in questions or emailed in questions prior to the session tonight. If you would, just in the question box on your screen, go ahead and submit any questions that you have as we go through the material. We'll do our best to get back with you and get those answered for you. And then we have a special announcement that we're making at the very end of the webinar tonight. And you'll all be very excited about that, as am I. So with no further delay, please let me welcome very warmly my good friend, Dr. David Hill.
Thank you, Justin, and hello to everyone. I hope that you're having some happy holidays. I'm excited tonight to talk with you about frankincense. I love the title, King of Essential Oils. The fact is, I've never met anyone who could not benefit from using essential oils, and especially frankincense essential oil. I'm going to talk tonight about the history of frankincense as well as some of the properties that make frankincense very unique as an essential oil. You almost can't talk about frankincense essential oil without also talking about myrrh essential oil. If we look at the traditional sense or the history associated with those two, myrrh traditionally was much more valuable than frankincense was, but frankincense was a lot scarcer as an essential oil and as a resin. And so because of that, the demand was greatly increased, and its value over time has grown appreciably, and now it's recognized to perhaps be the most valuable essential oil of all the essential oils that are available. Anciently, there was a lot of frankincense that was produced, over 3,000 tons annually, and that was because of the large demand for frankincense essential oil. Now, there's only a few hundred tons that are produced. It gives you an indication of why it's so important to understand the quality of any essential oil before you use it. The reason why is that simply most essential oils in the marketplace today have either otherwise been altered or synthetically created, just because of the scarcity of some of the oils, and also because of the expense associated with producing them the way that doTERRA produces the essential oils. Frankincense and myrrh have some similarities, and one of the similarities associated with them is that they both come from a resin that's liberated from the trees individually, frankincense or the myrrh tree. You can look at this picture, and the myrrh itself has a very dark color associated with it. Frankincense ends up with a lot of color variations in the resin for reasons that I'll discuss in just a little bit. One of the things that's interesting between myrrh and frankincense is that the aroma of myrrh tends to be more bitter, while the frankincense aroma has more of a spicy tone associated with it. There are some additional benefits that are clearly positioned with both frankincense and myrrh. They're both excellent for any type of skin condition, and they're used topically both anciently and in modern times for skin care and for skin rejuvenation. Frankincense and myrrh both are excellent antibacterials, and so they are very effective at reducing infections with any type of skin injury, a cut, or an abrasion, for example. There's a lot of research now that talks about the value of essential oils and its ability to work at the cellular level, the benefits that it has in both protecting the cells and, in this case, helping the cells to regenerate properly. And we'll talk more about that in just a few moments as well. Cold and flu, we're moving into the cold and flu season. One of the things I love about our On Guard throat lozenge is that it has myrrh essential oil in it. Myrrh is excellent for sore throats, as well as they both are very effective at helping to manage some of the other symptoms associated with it. Joint pain, discomfort, a very common thing for a lot of different people. Inflammation, circulation issues, all of them have been addressed one point or another, either in modern times because of the research and the recognized medicinal value of the essential oils, or traditionally the uses associated with them in ancient times. Either way, both frankincense and myrrh have a lot of value and a lot of benefits associated with them. I want to focus just a minute or two on some of the history associated with frankincense, because frankincense does have a very unique history. It's unique among the essential oils because of the heritage that it comes from and some of the traditional uses from the past. For example, frankincense is oftentimes used for bronchitis, laryngitis. We already talked about it for any type of skin problems or skin issues that someone might have. Historically, it was used to improve digestion. What they would do is they would take the resin from frankincense that would be soaked in water, then they would chew that resin. What's interesting about that is that now there's a lot of research that's talking about some of the more serious digestive issues that we face. Interesting that the number one cause for hospitalization throughout the world is secondary to digestive issues. And one of the things that's been noted about frankincense now in modern times and in modern uses is its ability to be pacifying to the digestive system. Even with very serious conditions, things like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, for example, frankincense has been studied and found to be very effective at reducing not only the symptoms associated with those and other type of digestive conditions, even something as mild as a stomach upset, but also very effective at controlling and eliminating the inflammation that comes with some of those digestive issues. Another thing that's really interesting about frankincense is that frankincense was really specialized as a commodity, either as the resin or as the essential oil itself. Because of its expense and because of its scarcity, it was only used by queens and pharaohs. Individuals of great wealth had the advantage of utilizing frankincense. And so one of the things that it was traditionally used for was for beautification. It was used in facial masks and cosmetics, and we find that same thing today in modern history. It's used a lot in skin care because of its regenerative capabilities, especially with the skin. Used anciently up to present day, it's used a lot of times for circulation issues to help improve eyesight. And then we also know that frankincense, like nearly all essential oils, has very profound effects against combating many different types of infection. Even if we look at some of the most historical documents that there is in a medical sense, this is the Iber's papyrus, just part of that papyrus. This documents a very rich history associated with essential oils, and even frankincense as a specific oil was called out, and it talks about and denotes how they were used to treat a variety of different ailments. The Iber's papyrus is actually one of the oldest medical documents known to man. So it is very interesting as it talks about all the different ways that frankincense and essential oils, plant extracts, were used historically as a primary form of medicine. I talked a little bit about the beautification uses of frankincense. It was used, interesting, they used frankincense a lot of times as an incense, and they would burn or char that resin into a blackened powder, and that powder was something that was called kohl, K-O-H-L, and they would frequently use that as an eyeliner. We've all seen those ancient Egyptian pictographs where around the eyes of the individual they would have a very dark eyeliner. That actually came from frankincense. Now, they believed it had spiritual benefits as well as the benefits associated with beauty. Frankincense was one of the main sources of trade anciently, and in fact we've all probably heard of the Frankincense Trail. This was a 2,400-mile trek where frankincense originated and then would be taken to the cities of export where it could be exported or traded for other goods and commodities. At times you'd see these great caravans of camels, as many as 6,000 camels in a single caravan that would be transporting frankincense, spices, other resins, other precious commodities and goods. And the route that they would follow has become known as the Frankincense Trail. It actually has a lot of different names associated with it, but you can see that it originated in Oman, specifically the Dhofar region of Oman. This is the area of the world where the frankincense that was developed and grown there, from the trees that are grown there, the resin that was received, it was believed that it was far superior above any other resin that was produced. And so beginning there in the Dhofar region of Oman, it would traverse all the way along the coast until it came very specifically to a stronghold called the city of Petra. Petra was really the treasury place where they stored all of the goods and commodities that were going to be exported or traded. And the reason why is because it was a safe haven. What you're looking at here is there is a long, narrow passageway that's 2 or more miles long that's on either side. Rock faces traverse the entire length of the passage. They would put guards or sentinels on top of that passageway to protect the city from any thieves or robbers who might try to enter into the city. This was effectively the only way you could enter into the city of Petra. And as you came close to the end of that passageway, you would begin to see this beautiful city of Petra that would open up before you. Now, what's unique about Petra is the entire city is carved out of stone, and you can see some of the dwellings, some of the buildings themselves were extremely elaborate, while others were very simplistic. The most wealthy, of course, lived in the most extravagant buildings. The building that everybody's always familiar with, you've seen it many times in movies and other things. This is the treasury house associated with Petra. And again, you can see all of the detail that went into carving this storehouse right out of this big rock stone, or rock face, I'm sorry, this big stone. Interesting, here they would store all of the frankincense, everything that had any value that was to be traded or sold as a commodity. This was at the center of 6 major trade routes in the area, so Petra became a very hotbed of activity in terms of the spice trade associated with frankincense. Now, frankincense itself, I talked about it being produced in the Dhofar region of Oman, but there's actually a lot of different species associated with frankincense. There's more than 25 different species that all produce essential oils. I'm going to concentrate on just the most popular or the most well-known of those different species. All of those 25 different species, however, are currently in production. The issue with frankincense, as is the case with all essential oils, it's really an issue of 2 different things. The first is a process called chemical polymorphism. I'm going to go through each one of these essential oils and talk with you about the uniqueness associated with them. Even though all frankincense essential oils have some similar qualities, depending on where they're grown or what climate that they're grown within as their native habitat, determines the constituents within the frankincense essential oil itself. It determines potency, and it also determines the quality of the constituents. In other words, environmental stressors within the plant itself, whether it's a tree or it's a flower or however it is in terms of being an aromatic source or an aromatic plant, the environmental stressors that it's exposed to is the determining factor for the quality and the constituents that are found within that essential oil. And so it makes sense. Chemical polymorphism means that different climates produce different types of essential oil. And so even though there's some similarities between all of these essential oils, these species that we'll talk about here just briefly today, there is some unique differences that is associated specifically with where they are grown throughout the world. So the first oil that I want to talk about, the first species, is Boswellia cartieri. It has a very arid odor, and it's because it has a very high concentration of octyl acetate. Now, this makes it very unique because this is commonly an essential oil that's used as an orange flavoring. It's also a very effective bug repellent. But because it's such a common essential oil, it's the most readily available of essential oils in the market today. You can see by the red pin that I have in the map there, it's grown in Somalia. But it's also, because of its popularity, the most widely researched of all of the frankincense essential oils. So much of the research you see revolves around Boswellia cartieri, and we can take advantage of that by recognizing that many of the compounds we find in one frankincense species are going to be duplicated in the other frankincense species as well, although the variation and the amount of those compounds will vary from species to species. Boswellia neglecta, this is also another very interesting grade of essential oil. It's generally not considered to be a very high grade of frankincense essential oil. It's commonly perceived, really, to be honest with you, just to be a perfume, and so it's used a lot in the perfume industry, which makes it very popular, but we generally don't think of that species of essential oil as having a lot of medicinal benefit. There would be better choices that we could make. Again, it's also grown in the Somalia region. Boswellia reve grows actually in Ethiopia. It makes it just a little bit unique, and one of the things that is unique about that essential oil is the type of compounds that it produces. It produces an unusually high amount of alpha-pinene, and that's valuable because when we look at this species, we know that monoterpenes, pinenes, as a monoterpene, we know that they're strongly anti-infectious. And so it's used a lot of times for its antibacterial activity. It's especially good for candida and yeast infections. But one of the things that we want to see with a frankincense oil is we want to see a lot of diversity of the compounds. One of the things to remember about essential oils is one of the reasons why they are so valuable and so beneficial is because we don't have just isolated compounds. We have this balance, something that I commonly refer to as therapeutic balance, where we have multiple compounds working together to create a synergistic effect. So although Boswellia reve has a lot of benefits to it, it also has very high amounts of a singular compound. So we would look for an essential oil that has better benefit or a wider range of benefits because of the complexity of the compounds associated with it. I already talked about Boswellia cartieri, but it's interesting because Boswellia cartieri and Boswellia sacra and Boswellia serrata, many people believe that they're all the same identical species, and that's clearly not the case. While Boswellia cartieri is grown in Somalia, Boswellia sacra also comes from Somalia, but also comes from Yemen. It has a little bit of diversity that way. It's a very interesting essential oil. This is a favorite among essential oil producers, and especially in the perfume industry. And the reason why is because this essential oil, this frankincense, has a very deep, woody tone associated with it. It's often associated, because of its popularity, it's one of the least expensive essential oils in the frankincense family. And so a lot of people like to source that because of its low expense. But also that means that you get a lot of variation in terms of the quality associated with it. So while it's very popular among essential oil producers, it's really probably not the essential oil that we'd want to use in a medicinal sense. It would not be our first choice. Boswellia serrata is actually unique because I've got a pin stuck out here in the middle of the ocean, but only because I couldn't make my map big enough to do what I wanted to do. This is oftentimes referred to as Indian olibanum, and the reason why is it comes from India, and that again makes it very unique in an environmental sense. It has some very unique qualities associated with it. It has a lot of alpha-pinenes, but generally this oil is only used aromatically as well. It has some topical applications, but by far the greatest value associated with frankincense dates all the way back to its origination, even back to the frankincense trail. I talked about the far region of Oman. One of the reasons why this is superior for its production of essential oils from the Boswellia freriana tree, that particular species, is because of the environment that that tree dwells within. Remember we talked about chemical polymorphism, and I said that chemical polymorphism is the process by which the environment creates stressors within the plant material itself to produce the most potent and effective essential oil, knowing that the essential oil is the protection system for the plant, as well as the communication of the plant, the identification of the plant, all of those different factors. So it's important that we have the highest potency that we can achieve, and we can do that by sourcing frankincense trees, the resin that comes from the trees in the Dhofar region of Oman. Now, a lot of individuals mistakenly believe that there's not a lot of frankincense in Oman. It is difficult to source, generally because frankincense from Oman is produced by families, and families have housed and taken care of those trees for generations. You're looking at frankincense trees in the Dhofar region of Oman, and you can see it's not a very beautiful environment, and you're probably looking at that frankincense tree and saying, that's not really what I expected to see. We have such an amazing essential oil that comes from a tree that, to be honest with you, isn't really a whole lot to look at. But that environment itself is perfect for producing this most potent form of frankincense. Very rich in limestone. In fact, the soil is mostly limestone, which acts as a terrific biological stressor for this species of frankincense. The climate itself is very arid and very dry, and in fact, when you harvest frankincense from this region of the world, you have to be careful because the climate is so dry that if you do that incorrectly, you'll kill the tree because it will lose all of its moisture because the climate is so harsh. So a little more unforgiving than some of the other climates associated with it. Another thing associated with this region of the world is you have the viper. This snake generally lives in the frankincense trees, and so great care, of course, has to be taken to ensure that there's no carpet vipers in the tree when they go to score the tree. A frankincense tree will generally live for about 100 years if it's taken care of, if it's harvested correctly and properly. And so families through the Dhofar region of Oman spend great time passing from generation to generation the skill necessary to score the trees appropriately so that they have a full lifespan, and also so that you can have as much harvest as you possibly can from the tree. Generally, trees in this region of the world are only harvested 2 or 3 times a year, depending on the tree itself and the conditions at the time of harvest. You've oftentimes heard the term frankincense tears, and you can see here where this frankincense tree has been scored, and you see this white milky resin that now is beginning to ooze from where the tree was scored. That's called the oleogum resin. Now, the oleogum resin is interesting because when we look at the resin itself, the actual content or the amount of essential oil that's found within that resin is relatively small by percentage value. Maybe as little as 6 or 7% of that resin is going to be in the form of an essential oil. That means there's a lot of other constituents in there that carry their own health benefits. This is the reason why anciently they would take the resin itself and they would like to utilize it as incense, or they would chew on it, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. When we liberate the essential oil, it carries with it, and we liberate the essential oil from the oleogum resin here for the same reason that we do from all aromatic plants that we're able to. And that is that the essential oil carries with it some very specific health benefits that are in a concentrated form, and that's why we like to take advantage and utilize the essential oils, because we have vast compounds with this particular frankincense species in the right formation. We call that therapeutic balance. Let me give you a little bit more information about when the tree is scored. Over a period of a week or two, this resin will begin to run or work its way down the tree. Of course, it's probably going to gather some impurities. There's other factors that could create an impurity within the resin itself. And so one of the things that's interesting about frankincense is you must divide the resin itself. And you can look at this sample here of resin and you see lots of different color variations. The darker pieces there are what we would call third quality resin. They're more opaque, and there's some of them in there. You have to look for them a little bit, but the more opaque or white pieces of resin are called superfine. In general, superfine is the resin that remains closest to where that incision point was from the tree. It has the least amount of impurities in it. And generally speaking, that third quality resin, that porous quality of the frankincense resin, is the resin that has traveled furthest from that incision point and has gathered impurities and other things within that process. It does not necessarily mean that the essential oil itself that we would liberate from that resin is of a lesser quality. It just means that there's more impurities, and that becomes a concern when you're distilling any essential oil from any plant material. You need to be keenly aware of the impurities, and so time needs to be taken, of course, to separate out each of those resins and definitively decide, are they first, second, third quality, or are they that most desirable superfine quality? These are some of the individuals who are separating the frankincense resin that we've purchased from Oman in that Dhofar region, and they're separating it into those 4 quality grades. Of course, then our resin is distilled. This is just one of the distilleries that we have formed partnerships with all over the world. It's unique when you distill essential oils. Distilling frankincense is very different than distilling peppermint, for example. And there's a skill and a science associated with that. And so we're very careful about the partnerships we form, both for receiving the resin and now in this case for distilling the frankincense essential oil. But when you've done all of that properly, you have an essential oil that produces a lot of health benefits and some very significant value in terms of individual health. These are some of the modern-day uses of frankincense, and I call them modern-day uses because these are the uses where we have a lot of research now is associated with frankincense as an essential oil. Excellent for scar tissue. We talked a little bit earlier about stomach issues and digestive issues. Ulcers certainly is one of those big issues, but we also have ulcerations that can reside on the surface of the skin, and frankincense can be equally beneficial for ulcers that way, and any type of wounds. Frankincense has been noted to build a healthy immune response in your body. It is an effective and actually a very powerful pain reliever. Most people don't think of frankincense that way, but it has good analgesic effects, and there's much in the way of research to demonstrate that. Frankincense, we talked about cold and flu symptoms earlier, and we said this was something that both frankincense and myrrh shared in common. It's a very good expectorant. It's excellent for relieving any type of nervous tension, very calming and very soothing to the central nervous system. And we talked, of course, about its value in skin care. But I want to expand that concept just a little bit and talk about frankincense and 3 other very specific things that would suggest that we want to use frankincense as part of a daily routine. One is what frankincense can do to protect individual cells. The second is how does it affect our mood? And lastly, can and does frankincense control inflammatory responses in our body to help reduce them, knowing that inflammation destroys tissue? So let's talk a little bit about cancer. This is something that most individuals have actually quite a lot of fear about, and it's understandable because we live in an environment that is very toxic, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. It has become almost to the point of not whether or not you will get cancer, but when you'll get cancer in many parts of the world. What's interesting about that is if we look, you're looking at the DNA here with an attached chromosome in place there too. You can see that. When we look at the DNA, and actually I have stated that incorrectly. It's not attached. It's just showing you another variation of DNA representation. So it's estimated that 95% of cancers result from damaged DNA. That there must be factors that exist that when our DNA, because genetic factors associated with our cell, when they become damaged, it's more than just that they become damaged. The cell itself now has a change, and it has the potential to become cancerous in our body. And 95% of all cancers are not genetic in nature. They occur as a result of this damage, a mutation that has occurred within the DNA itself. So I'm going to walk you through some of this process very carefully without getting too deep into the information because we don't have time for that. And I'm more interested tonight in just sharing with you the general concept of why that's so valuable and so significant. There's three main causes to DNA disruption in your body. First is free radicals, and by now we've all heard a lot about free radicals. We see it in the news, we see it in the media. It's definitely reported well within medicine. We also know that free radicals exist within our body naturally, as well as we can be exposed to them from the outside environment. So we must control free radicals because the greatest damage that they do is at the cellular level within the DNA itself. Unfortunately, we live in a very toxic environment and a very toxic world at this point, and toxicity plays a significant role because it disrupts the way that DNA replicates within your body, and those disruptions cause the mutations that we've been talking about. And poor nutrition, much of the time our body ceases to function normally simply because we don't have all of the nutritional factors or components that we need. Now I'm going to give you a gentle reminder here. I know we're talking about frankincense essential oil, but I cannot talk about essential oils without talking about this other side, which is nutrition. And so I'm just going to give a quick reminder that when you use products like the Lifelong Vitality, this is why it's so important. This is why you hear me, myself and others say, Lifelong Vitality is core, it's foundational to your health. It does help to combat free radicals with the alpha CRS. But we know that with the Z omega, that is protective of the cells themselves. Vitamins and minerals, antioxidants is how your body rids itself of toxins through the liver. So that becomes foundational, as well as we could have a discussion now about several other essential oils. But these are the basic causes of why the DNA in your body gets damaged. So let's talk about how frankincense can offer protection to that cycle or sequence. One of the values, I'm going to talk about a class of compounds now called monoterpenes, and I'm not going to give any definition as to what a monoterpene is specifically, because I just want to concentrate on why monoterpenes are so valuable. One of the great things about frankincense, and frankincense, Boswellia freriana, that we are producing for you out of the far region of Oman, it has 70% monoterpenes by content. That's important because when a cell becomes damaged and when the DNA becomes damaged, it sends out a signal. It's called the damaged DNA response. And it really is signaling for one of two things to happen: either repair me or eliminate me. And it stimulates a process known as apoptosis. Apoptosis is cellular death. And if a cell can't be repaired, we want it to die. We want the body to be able to eliminate it. Monoterpenes are important because they stimulate apoptosis within the damaged cells themselves. We don't want damaged cells to remain because they have the potential of becoming mutated and cancerous in our body. The other thing that we talked about a little bit earlier was toxicity, and that's a big issue. And one of the ways primarily that we eliminate toxicity from our body is, of course, through the liver. But that takes enzymes, and one of the things that monoterpenes does is it increases the level of liver enzymes that specifically are involved in removing carcinogenic toxins. Also, monoterpenes have been shown to interfere with cholesterol. Now, high cholesterol by itself is a concern for a lot of individuals, but cholesterol, certain things that happen within cholesterol, it participates in the development of tumors within your body. And if we can interfere with the synthesis of cholesterol, we can either slow or reduce potentially tumor formation in the body, and that's exactly what monoterpenes do. Now, there's some other values associated with it too. This is you're looking at a picture of a cancer cell. There's a lot of research talking about essential oils in cancer, specifically frankincense in cancer. It is fast becoming one of the most widely studied essential oils because of its ability, recognized ability to have some interference with the cancer process. This is research, this is just a picture of a cancer cell, but I put it in here so I could talk with you briefly about some research that really started several years ago. It was done first in Puerto Rico, and now it's been repeated at the University of California, Berkeley, where they've demonstrated that frankincense essential oil has the ability to help repair DNA once it's become damaged. Now remember, we talked about your body has this very unique process called the damaged DNA response, and if the DNA cannot be repaired, then we said monoterpenes like we find in frankincense can stimulate cell death. That's important. Even better if we can stimulate repair of the damaged DNA itself. And this research is talking about how frankincense essential oil does that very thing. Even when we look at how a cell replicates, there's a limitation to how many times a cell can replicate within your body, and that's called the Hayflick limit. There's some determining factors associated with that. One, some very similar things that we just talked about in terms of damaging your DNA, high amounts of toxicity, poor nutrition, free radicals, all can impact how effectively and how many times your cell can replicate. But then also a very specialized protein associated with your cells called a telomere. You can see here on the end of this X chromosome, and you see the genetic material inside, you can see what's called a telomere. The more we're exposed to toxicity, the more stressed we become, the shorter that telomere length becomes, and the less the lifespan is associated with our cell. One of the things that's unique about frankincense essential oil is that frankincense has the ability to do two things. One, protect the telomeres themselves so we have proper cellular lifespan. What that means is that we don't age prematurely when we use essential oils like frankincense. The other thing that frankincense has been noted for is it's a great reducer of stress. It's a mood stabilizer. What you're looking at here is an ancient incense burner. The incense would be placed in the top up there in the dish, and underneath a heat source would be provided so that we could liberate the aroma associated with the frankincense resin. That is something that is still done today in modern times. The aroma of frankincense itself can be a very strong and powerful component in stabilizing your mood. It, along with citrus oils, for example, is a great combination or a great way to help be able to do that. And if we look at why mood is so important, major depression is the single greatest cause of disability worldwide. And we can look at a lot of things that would demonstrate that. Here, for example, you're looking at a brain that's depressed versus one that's not depressed, and you can see that there's a lot of subdued behavior. One of the issues associated with depression, of course, is stress. Stress is the most important precipitator of depression, according to Princeton University. I agree with that, and if we could see a visual associated of maybe why stress is such an important precipitator, this is what's referred to on the right-hand side of your screen. You see something that's called a dendritic tree. It's the neurological connections in your brain. That's the easiest way to describe it. And on the left, what you're seeing is under stress, you can see that those greatly reduce and diminish. And as that happens, the likelihood of cognitive dysfunction, of stress and anxiety disorders long-term, and even of depression and other forms of disease like Alzheimer's disease, loose body dementia, all of those factors become a very critical part of that. One of the things that's noted with frankincense essential oil is that it is very effective at enhancing and stabilizing the mood, while at the same time it helps to alleviate anxiety and depression. One of the primary reasons why is because of a unique compound associated with the Boswellia freriana called insensyl acetate. It has actually been studied a great deal for its ability to reduce anxiety and depression. It actually activates the ion channels that are important for mood stability to alleviate anxiety and depression. And it's why people can do something as simple as diffuse frankincense or apply frankincense to the back of their neck or just breathe in the aroma, and they at times can have very significant results associated with that. There was even some study that was done not too long ago looking at patients who had severe brain injuries. And one of the things that was discovered about this compound that we find in frankincense, this insensyl acetate, is that it has the ability to protect and reduce neurological damage. even in patients who have had brain injury for various reasons. Now, inflammation plays a significant role in that whole process too, and the reason why is because whenever you have inflammation that's present, it doesn't matter why it's there, it's going to destroy tissue. We all have periods of time where we have acute inflammation that's present. I have some type of an injury that's occurred, my body needs to heal. It's when we have chronic inflammation that it really becomes problematic. And this is the reason why in medicine it's commonly said that inflammation is the root cause of disease. It's because it's very progressive in nature. It's relentless in its destroying or destruction of tissue throughout the body wherever the inflammation is present. One of the things that's very good about frankincense is that it has been shown now through research to inhibit the production of pro-inflammatory mediators in the body. I see a lot of individuals who have arthritic type pain and damage associated from the inflammation that occurs when we have long-standing arthritis. And frankincense has proved to be very valuable. In fact, to date, there are more than 20 different scientific studies that are specific to arthritic type conditions, and the ability of frankincense to reduce the inflammation as well as improve mobility and reduce pain by as much as 60 to 70%. Even the swelling that's associated with frankincense is greatly diminished in these studies when frankincense was applied topically over the affected area. So frankincense has been very effective for both acute and chronic conditions of health. And we've talked about many ways that you could use frankincense tonight, many different conditions. You know that frankincense can be used on the skin in any way. We know that frankincense can be diffused or frankincense can be used topically. Use frankincense for any acute or chronic conditions of health. And we've talked about digestive disorders, we've talked about inflammatory disorders, we've talked about cold and flu conditions, we've talked about depression and anxiety disorders, but we've also talked about frankincense in a different concept. And I like this statement, it is a wise man's part rather to avoid sickness than to wish for medicines. In other words, prevention really probably is our absolute best form of health care. I read an article not too long ago that was talking about the different types of medicine that are available. It was in a medical journal, and they were talking about really how we should probably be willing to transition into focusing on and teaching individuals how to work in a model of prevention with their health rather than being in this more reactive state that unfortunately many of us find ourselves in. And so the other thing I want to share with you about frankincense just quickly is that frankincense is a very effective and active model of prevention. One of my favorite ways to use frankincense essential oil, and I recommend this to people on a regular basis, is that I believe frankincense should be used daily. Whether you have some type of a condition that perhaps you're dealing with, or you're trying to avoid and maintain any condition, you're maintaining your health, so you're acting in a model of prevention, frankincense can be very effective and very powerful. My favorite way to use frankincense, and I use it this way every single day, is I put 2 or 3 drops of frankincense under my tongue. I do that every night and every single morning. And the reason why I do is, one, because I feel better when I do, to be honest with you. But secondly, I know that I'm being stabilizing to my body. Frankincense as an essential oil represents a wonderful opportunity for anyone who chooses or would like to use essential oil, and that is that frankincense has a very wide and a very diverse path in terms of the benefits that it brings to you with all aspects of your health. And for this reason, I say that frankincense is not just the king of essential oils, it's an essential oil that we should be willing and excited about using every single day. I love frankincense essential oil. I use it in my own home. I use it in my own family. My invitation to you, if you're not using frankincense, of course, is to begin using frankincense. And be excited about the fact, as you learned tonight, that you're not just receiving frankincense, you're receiving the best, the most potent, the most pure frankincense that's available anywhere in the world. I love doTERRA, and I'm proud to be a part of doTERRA for that reason. I know the commitment that we have to the quality of the essential oils that we produce and make available. I've said this many times. I am oftentimes asked, why do we go to the trouble, why do we go to the lengths that we do to produce the essential oils in the way that we do? Quite frankly, it's because we use the essential oils just like you do. Thank you very much for spending your time with me. I hope to see all of you soon. I hope that your experiences with essential oils are nothing short of remarkable and life-changing. I know that many of you have experienced that already with doTERRA. Happy holidays to each of you, and I'll look forward to visiting with you again in the very near future.